Now, as governments across the world implement a state of emergency, with that comes increasing concern about a potential abuse of power. This as authorities use digital technology in order to carry out contact tracing, which is a mainstay of infectious disease control. The worry is that this is going to open the doors to far more invasive forms of government snooping later on down the road. Joining me now is Leila Choukroune, a Professor of International Law at Portsmouth University in the UK, also a specialist in democracy and citizenship. Leila, thank you for your time. What are your major concerns, given this pandemic, no doubt, is going to be with us for months, if not years?
Yes, absolutely. The first thing I'd like to say is that it's not to minimize the seriousness of the crisis. It is very serious. However, we also have to reflect upon, to think about longer term consequences in terms of, in particular, rights, freedoms and human rights violation. In times of crisis, the rule of law and democracy no longer go hand in hand, and faced with global threats, the pandemic today, terrorism yesterday, governments are increasingly derogating from common law. In the name of population protection, the state of exception actually becomes the norm, and this is quite worrying.
But authorities, for instance, do need to track people down. Certainly if you look at South Korea, Singapore and Taiwan, where the cases there are far lower, digital technology became an important tool, didn't it?
Probably, I think we don't have enough scientific evidence to really support this type of statement. What I'm a bit worried about, you see, is that you cannot, on the one hand, denounce the scandal of Cambridge Analytica and the use of private data by internet giants like Facebook, and at the same time support the sort of invasion of privacy for public good, you see. So in any case, if ever there is, and there is today, a grave situation, a situation of public emergency, to quote, international law, there are a number of rights from which we cannot derogate. And these rights are the right to life, the prohibition of torture and slavery, judicial guarantee, including the right for fair trial, freedom of thought, conscience and religion. And what we see today are a number of derogations to these very fundamental rights. I'm thinking about the right of freedom of thought, conscience and religion in particular.
Now, these are unprecedented times and governments are clearly having to create policies on the run as the situation gets worse each day. So how can they ensure they get the balance right, Leila?
You're very right. I think governments and democracies in particular are on a very tight rope. They react to situation rather than, prevent and foresee the future. So I think the chronology is extremely important. If you look at what happened in most democracies, these very strict measures have been taken before any legislative reform has been put in place. And this is not the way to do it. So I understand there is a sense of urgency naturally, but government also have to prepare for longer term consequences in terms of rights and human rights violation. So think carefully, adopt the necessary legal reforms to their domestic laws, and then plan ahead the measure in a legal manner which is supporting the rule of law, not to emulate what has happened in China. Because you see, I'm quite worried about the fact that the sort of benchmark is China, but China's never been a democracy or a rule of law, so we cannot act the same way.
But the reality is that those who probably have the education, the information, the ability to stand up and contest such decisions being made by governments most likely are working from home, are based at home. You can't even go and hold a protest anymore. So how can the public ensure that the governments do the right thing by them?
That's really interesting question. To respond to that, I'm going to give you a few examples. The crisis is not yet over, but we see everywhere in the world, in the US and in China in particular, a number of class action getting ready against who? Against the Chinese state to start with, for quite obvious reasons, for negligence in the management of the crisis, for non-transparency. So we can imagine a number of other possible class action against democratic states then for violation of human rights. So how do you do that? You can't protest, you can't go outside, but you can get organized online. There is also a form of justice taking place strangely online at the moment because courts are closed sometimes. So I see in the realm of private arbitration a number of hearings online, you see. So in terms of organization, to get back to your question, it's likely that citizens, the most vulnerable, can get organized in any case without protesting, without going to the street, but using this technology we were talking about before.
Leila Choukroune, it's been great speaking to you. Thank you so much.